Audience discretion is advised due to potentially distressing and sensitive material. Hannah Clarke was born on September 8, 1988 to parents Lloyd and Sue. Hannah had a younger brother. She was a cheerful, active, and ambitious child. She had an infectious smile and met friends wherever she went. She was the school captain in her senior year of high school. At the age of 16, she represented the state for trampoline. Pretty soon, she started coaching trampoline classes, and when she finished school, she started teaching kinder gym at the PCYC and worked as a teacher in vacation care. She met Rowan Baxter when she was 20 and he was 31, 11 years her senior. He was a former rugby league player. They met when Baxter started working at the PCYC as a boxing instructor. At the time, Hannah was still living with her parents and Baxter was living with his wife whom he'd met when she was 16 and he was 18. They had a son together. By the time their son was 2, his wife wanted to leave the relationship, but Baxter wouldn't let her go. Although he told none of this to Hannah and just told her that they're separated and living together for the sake of their son. In reality, the reason why he didn't agree to the separation was that he couldn't afford to move out, and at the same time, his wife knew he was having an affair, which made the whole situation more complicated for the family. However, as his relationship with Hannah progressed, he became more willing to let his wife go and agreed on a parenting plan for their son. He moved in with a friend, and after 6 months of being in a relationship with Hannah, she got pregnant. She wanted to keep the baby, but Baxter convinced her that she was too young to be a mom, and she aborted the pregnancy. They got married in October 2012, and Hannah's parents paid for the wedding. At the time, Hannah was 14 weeks pregnant with their first child, Aaliyah. Although Baxter had previously aroused suspicion considering his behavior, it only grew worse after the wedding. For instance, he was angry that the guests didn't give them more money as gifts so he could take Hannah overseas for a honeymoon, and right after the wedding, Baxter refused to pay child support for his son. In order to be able to support their new family, Hannah and Baxter decided to open their own gym at Capelaba and asked Sue and Lloyd, Hannah's parents, to invest, and so they did. They invested $18,000 and another investor contributed $40,000. The gym didn't do very well and the couple were always behind on bills and rent. But what is interesting is how Baxter dealt with the problem. He simply left the unopened bills in the Clarke's letterbox for them to pay them off. The main reason why the gym was failing was because Baxter was not a good businessman and could not handle money. Plus, as reported, he was rude and blunt with the potential and current members of the gym. He even went as far as calling the women at his gym disgusting pigs on his social media, stating that, quote, "I have had to fill up the men's hand wash 3 times. You women are pigs. I haven't had to fill that up," end quote, which Hannah's friend and many others found extremely shocking. All this led to the gym shutting down in 2019 and the investors were still owed $75,000. Meanwhile, their family kept growing. After Aaliyah was born in 2013, they had another daughter, Leanna, in 2015 and a son, Trey, in 2016. Aaliyah was sweet, she was articulate, and excelled at school. She loved reading and was extremely well behaved. Leanna was a people pleaser and always tried to make sure everybody was happy. Trey was a happy little guy who loved running around and jumping and playing and was a total mama's boy, always clinging to her and going wherever she went. The 4 of them were inseparable and went to the beach and the gym together. From the outside, even with all the financial struggles, they seemed like the perfect family. But nothing is ever as it seems, is it? On the inside, while some noticed or knew, Baxter was controlling everything. He refused to allow Hannah to spend any time with her parents and brother. Even on Mother's Day, Hannah was only allowed to spend half a day with her mom, and then she had to spend the rest of the day with him, celebrating his deceased mom. He checked her phone in the middle of the night while she was sleeping. Once she woke up in the middle of the night and caught him red-handed and asked what he was doing. In response, he simply threw her phone across the room, breaking the screen. At one point, Hannah even became suspicious that he was tracking her car and phone and listening to her conversations on the phone because he questioned why she phoned certain people he had no idea she was talking to and wasn't even in the room while she was talking to them. He constantly criticized her appearance and called her a pig even though she was in amazing physical shape. Apparently, he was threatened by her appearance and that's why he tried to put her down. He dictated what she could wear and who she could see and talk to. He controlled her social media and wouldn't let her have her own account. They shared a Facebook account. He demanded sex every night and would threaten to kill himself if she didn't give in to his demands or wouldn't speak to her for days. In 2019, after Hannah refused to have sex with him, he went missing with a hose, letting Hannah think that he was gonna commit suicide. Hannah and her parents drove around for hours looking for him. He returned home and told Hannah that he had tried to kill himself. Also, when he was angry with Hannah, he would take it out on the children by not talking to them or not letting them do the things they had planned. If they didn't put their toys and stuff away as fast as he wanted, he would throw them in the garbage. On one occasion, he deliberately dropped his mother-in-law on her head during a workout session and laughed, even though she and her husband were the ones financing the gym. He even ordered her work schedule, even though he could never support his family. If this isn't enough, after Trey was born, Baxter would only work 3 days a week and rested on the other days, while Hannah took numerous classes at the gym they owned together, took care of the children, and was taking a marketing course online. He shouted at her and told her the house was a pigsty. She could never wear shorts or anything pink because it was for children. When Hannah finally had enough and decided to leave and he realized he was no longer in control, he began to ask his friends, who he hadn't seen for years I might add, to spy on her. Hannah leaving raised a lot of questions for the people around her. They started wondering if it ever hit her, even though some had already witnessed instances of violence in the couple's relationship. But Hannah insisted the whole time that he'd never hit her, but had done other things to her, but she never elaborated on what exactly he'd done. Sue, Hannah's mother, said that she saw Baxter physically assault Hannah while they were separated and in the midst of their custody battle. She said one day when Baxter was dropping off the kids, Hannah saw inappropriate pictures of herself in the car and tried to grab them so the children wouldn't see. But he grabbed her wrist up behind her back, almost breaking it. Mrs. Clarke ran outside and started screaming at Baxter to let her go, which he did while calling her a mole. Hannah got a sprained wrist and a split lip. Later, her mother also discovered that he'd put his hands on Hannah's neck in November 2019. In another instance, Nicole Brooks, Hannah's friend, recalled that after Baxter had come back from a martial arts class and was full of adrenaline and testosterone, he tripped her, looked her in the eye, and said, quote, "You have no idea what I'm capable of," end quote. This all indicated that Baxter was in fact physically abusive towards her. She even, asking a colleague how to write a will, said that she knew Baxter was going to kill her and had to make sure that her children were well taken care of and went to the right people. But even after the separation, Baxter didn't back off and still pushed Hannah to her limits. He sobbed whenever he was FaceTiming the children and even abducted their middle child, Leanna, after Hannah refused to let him have the children for the night. The story behind the event was that the Clarkes had bought the children skateboards and Baxter insisted that Hannah took them to the park for them to try them out. After hearing that Hannah wouldn't allow him to have the children, he just grabbed Leanna and dragged her along while she was crying, and Hannah, Trey, and Aaliyah were following close behind, crying and begging for him not to take her. He disappeared with her for 2 days, even after being visited by the police and advised by his lawyer to take the child back. It is reported by the witnesses that they thought it was a case of child abduction, and the police were flagged down by concerned bystanders. However, the police couldn't do much in this case as there was no child protection order in place to stop him from legally having access to his children, but they did describe the act as disgusting. The abduction led to Hannah fearing for her children's safety and having several interactions with the police to try and stop Baxter from doing anything ominous he may have been planning. The abduction also caused Leanna to visibly suffer from anxiety. Therefore, a protection order was issued and the couple was assessed as high risk. At this point, Baxter was spiraling so bad that one of his friends lent him money to seek professional help, just like his in-laws had many times before, but it's not actually clear whether he visited a psychologist or not while he was still married to Hannah. Although he did make multiple appointments for counseling in order for them to assist him to contest the DVO and get what he wanted. He even manipulated doctors and psychologists to get what he wanted. On February 17, 2020, Rowan Baxter made an unusual request to borrow his aunt's car for a couple of days, telling her that he had to travel to another city and his own car just used too much fuel. On the same day, he was caught on CCTV entering a hardware store. He purchased a green jerry can, zip ties, and a bottle of methylated spirits. On February 19, 2020, Baxter staked out the Clarke's family home early in the morning, waiting for Hannah and the children to leave to go to school. When they got into Hannah's Sportage, Baxter jumped into the front seat while his 3 children were strapped in the back seat and told Hannah to drive, just drive. Hannah started screaming, yelling for him to get out, but he was holding a petrol container. Hannah starts driving, but upon seeing a man holding a hose and washing his car, she pulls over and yells, quote, call the police, he's trying to kill me, he put petrol on me, end quote. Mr. Zemek, the man washing his car, didn't even know there were children in the car. He never saw them. But so Baxter was restraining Hannah in a bear hug, holding both her arms down and not letting her go. Mr. Zemek went closer to investigate, but it was then that Baxter sparked the lighter and there was a huge blaze. Hannah was pulled out by the bystanders witnessing the explosion, and Baxter had got out of the passenger seat. She was head to toe in flames. Mr. Zemek told Hannah to lie down on the grass and roll around while he hosed her down, trying to save her, and put out the flames. She was saying something, but he couldn't make it out. Stephanie Ring, an off-duty paramedic who was present at the scene, heard her say, quote, my babies are in the car. Why didn't I just stay in the car with them? End quote. She kept pleading for someone to save her kids, but it was just too late. No one could even get close enough to see them. All they saw was a car seat. Only 3% of Hannah's body was not affected by the fire. She said, quote, I can't believe he's done this. I've got a DVO. I can't believe he's done this. Where are my babies? Where are my kids? How could he do this? That's my babies in there. End quote. One witness said that it was as if Baxter was making sure his children were dead. It was like he was guarding the car. If he went to the right side, Baxter would follow him. If he went to the left side, he was there. While people were trying to extinguish the fire, Baxter dived back into the car and came right back out. No one knew why he'd done this, but then someone notices that he's retrieved a knife from the car and warned everyone else to get back. Baxter sustained burns to 80% of his body, but was still standing, and people were pleading with him to drop the knife. Baxter stabbed himself 3 times, with the one to his heart being the fatal injury. While the first respondents did everything they could, he died there on the scene along with his 3 children, Aaliyah, 6 years old, Leanna, 4 years old, and Trey, only 3 years old. Hannah was interviewed on the way to the hospital, and the gist goes like this. Hannah did everything she could to give as much information as she could, even though the soles of her feet were the only parts of her body that were not burned, and the paramedics couldn't even find a vein to put in the IV. She described everything that went on that morning, how Baxter got into the car and yelled at her to drive, how she tore his clothes to get free, how he poured petrol on her and lit the car alight. She was brave and strong throughout the whole conversation and said that she knew her children were dead and she didn't want to survive. She died that evening at the hospital. There was a chilling note Baxter had left which read, quote, "I'm finishing your game. I don't want to play anymore. I have told the kids that you love them. They will miss you, I'm sure." End quote. This brutal tragedy hit Australia. Hannah and her three beautiful children were mourned across the nation, and this was the first time ever that Australia came to know about coercive control. Hannah's father talked about his daughter's last act. It was a phone call she made to her dad, but when he picked up, there was no one on the other end, and he assumed it was a pocket dial or one of her children was playing with her phone and had accidentally called him. But no, Hannah was dying when she made the phone call. A couple of hours after the phone call, the police told Lloyd and Sue that their grandchildren had been brutally murdered and Hannah was at the hospital barely clinging to life. They were told that they were killed by the one person who was supposed to love and protect them no matter what. Lloyd continued, quote, "Coercive control is about taking away a person's voice and ultimately their identity. Her final call was a metaphor for what happens to victims of coercive control." End quote. Coercive control is a term originally developed by Professor Evan Stark, who defined it as a, quote, "pattern of domination that includes tactics to isolate, degrade, exploit, and control a person, if frightened to hurt them physically." End quote. Rowan Baxter was truly a master of manipulation. Interviewing their friends and families, the police came across many examples of coercive control exhibited by Baxter. By a pastor friend and former employer of Hannah, Baxter was described as an alpha male personality with controlling and paranoid behavior. Baxter had confided in him that he knew something was wrong with him and had to fix it, but lacked self-awareness as to how to go about doing it. Martin Cole described how obsessed Baxter was with monitoring Hannah's behavior, especially at the gym they ran together. He said that once when Hannah had closed up the gym with a male employee, Baxter had become obsessed with the idea that something was going on between the pair. He even tried to get hold of the CCTV camera footage on the street to check on her movements and what went on that night. But this was not the first time Baxter had exhibited such obsessive behavior. He had apparently done similar things to his ex-wife, who shared that he would show up uninvited and leave notes on her car. Just like with Hannah, he'd placed a hosepipe in the boot of his car and had threatened that he would end it all for all three of them. But fortunately, she got away from the toxic relationship. This went so far that even his eldest daughter Aaliyah fought back against him despite living in fear of him. The 6-year-old told her father not to come back after witnessing him yelling at her mom. She sometimes even avoided FaceTiming her dad, making excuses. Hannah was described as kind-hearted, warm, caring, fun-loving, and a wonderful mother. Our thoughts and prayers go out to all of those who were affected by this heinous crime.